heart of the ancient forest of Nigeria, where the morning mist clung to towering Iroko trees, lay the village of Abana. To any traveler passing through, Abana seemed like any other village, but beneath its ordinary surface lay secrets darker than the moonless nights. Long ago, before the curse that now bound the village, there had lived a king named Adebayo, whose major flaw was his insatiable lust for women. He slept with every female he desired, treating them as nothing more than objects for his pleasure. This king possessed spiritual powers that made him nearly impossible to kill, powers backed by evil spirits that fed on his wickedness. The only way to defeat him was through his own weakness, his obsession with women. But there was a deadly consequence. Whoever killed him would inherit his curse and become even more evil than he had been. Onoja had been a young, power-hungry woman when she first heard of King Adebayo's terrible reign. Her desire to kill him was not born from a wish to end his wickedness, but from her burning ambition to possess his spiritual powers. She was young and ignorant of the true cost of such power. Using her beauty as bait, she seduced the king and killed him afterwards. But the moment he died, she discovered the horrible truth. The evil spirit that had possessed Adebayo immediately transferred to Onoja, changing her from a beautiful young woman into a terrifying creature. Onoja tried to resist the curse until they gave her one condition that might ease her suffering. She must honor women as goddesses and make all men do the same. And so began the strange new life of Abana village, where women were revered as sacred beings and men lived in complete separation from them. The village was split by an invisible line that ran through its center. On one side lived the men, in modest mud houses with thatched roofs. On the other side stood the women's community, a collection of elegant compounds surrounded by high walls. The two sides never mixed, except during the sacred cleansing ceremony held once every quarter. Even then, they sat facing each other with a clear demarcation between them, never allowed to mingle. At the edge, in between both walls, stood Onoja's palace. Its towers reached towards the sky like gnarled fingers, and no one dared approach it. All women in Abana were divided into 5 sacred groups, assigned at birth by Isuja, the ancient spiritual leader. The Gidi were the farmers, their hands perpetually stained with rich earth. The Masa were the warriors, moving with fluid grace and wearing clothing marked with red symbols. The Domes served as priestesses and spiritual leaders, their heads crowned with elaborate beads. The Duri were the teachers and mothers responsible for raising all children born in the village. They wore white wrappers and carried carved staffs that marked their authority. Then there were the Yadi, the women designated for reproduction and marriage. They lived apart from the others, draped in the finest clothes and adorned with gold jewelry. Every month, a lottery was held, and 5 Yadi were randomly selected to be given to men for the purpose of bearing children. These women were not married in the traditional sense, for the men paid no bride price. Instead, any man choosing to host a Yadi was considered blessed by the gods and was expected to treat her like a god, honoring her every wish and desire. The people of Abana believed that when a man properly honored a Yadi, the gods would bless him with prosperity and good fortune. But there was one absolute rule that governed these arrangements: neither the Yadi nor the man must fall in love. Such emotion was considered disrespectful to the Yadi and a sign that she had been defiled. The penalty for a Yadi who broke this rule was severe. She would be thrown out of the women's community, and those cast out rarely survived, as desperate men who had never been chosen to host a Yadi would often divorce such women until they died from the abuse. The moment a Yadi gives birth to a baby, the child would be immediately taken to the Duri for raising, and the parents were expected to look away from their offspring, never to form bonds with them. This system ensured that children grew up without knowing their parents, raised collectively by the Duri according to Abana's ancient traditions. After decades of this system, most people in Abana had accepted their bound state as normal. The spirits that possessed her would kill anyone who tried to escape Abana, keeping the people trapped in their bound states. The women brought up in this tradition saw nothing wrong with their separated lives. Only a few rebels had stumbled into what the villagers called forbidden knowledge. The Dori always warned the children under their care about this forbidden knowledge, telling them how it had destroyed many people who had sought it out. Every male and female child grew up avoiding and dreading these dangerous ideas. The few enlightened villagers who had discovered the truth secretly prayed and waited for the day when Onoja would be defeated and they could live like other people. But they in Abana openly thought, for anyone caught speaking of freedom would become Onoja's next meal. Among these rebels was a young woman named Hora. Since every child born in Abana was immediately taken to the Dori for nurturing, one could easily misplace the parents of a particular child. Hora was one of such children. No one could determine who her parents were, though the popular guess was that she was Onoja's daughter. This speculation was supported by several factors. Hora possessed the same striking beauty that Onoja had been known for before her transformation. Hora was one of the unique women in Abana, as she was a Yadi and also a Masa, making her both a designated mother and a warrior. Her strength and fighting skills rivaled those of the most skilled Masa, while her beauty and grace fit perfectly with the Yadi's sacred role. This duality made her one of the most sought-after women in the village, and as her 25th birthday approached, many men began offering sacrifices to the gods, hoping to be blessed with Hora as their assigned Yadi. But Hora was one of those who despised Onoja's rule and longed for freedom for the people of Abana. She wanted to make a difference in her village, to break the chains that bound her people. Hora had become one of the enlightened ones, secretly studying the forbidden knowledge with a small group of rebels who met in hidden places when the moon was dark. Among them was her closest friend Gogo, who shared her fierce determination to change their world. Together, they were considered the most formidable pair in the women's community, moving in secret and engaging in activities that constantly drew warnings from the Dori leadership. But Hora and Gogo were too far gone in their rebellion to be held back by fear of the cursed queen. They had discovered too much truth to return to ignorant acceptance of their fate. Hora would recite prophecies that spoke of a time when their bondage would end. The most important of these prophecies told of one who would be born with the essence of 3 tribes within her soul, one who would be a warrior, mother, and priest all at once. This chosen one would break the chains that bound Abana and restore the natural order of life. Many people had dismissed this prophecy as impossible, but the enlightened ones had noticed signs that made them wonder if the prophecy might be true. The scroll spoke of the chosen one being born when the spirits were confused. As Hora's 25th birthday drew near, the tension in the village grew thick. The approaching ceremony would determine which man would be blessed with her as his Yadi, and the anticipation was palpable throughout both sides of the village. But Hora had been making secret plans, known only to herself and Gogo. The night before her birthday, Hora stood at her window, looking out at the village she had known all her life. She was beginning to understand that she might be the one spoken of in the prophecy, the key to breaking the curse that had bound Abana for so long. The ceremony began at dawn with the sound of talking drums and the singing of praise songs. The entire village had gathered, men on one side, women on the other, with a sacred line between them. Hora stood in the center of the women's compound, dressed in the finest gold wrapper and adorned with jewelry that caught the morning lights. Her beauty was so striking that even the men across the divide stopped their preparations to stare. She looked like a goddess, which was exactly what the system had trained them to see. Isuja, the ancient spiritual leader, shuffled forward with her bag of divination tools. Her eyes were clouded with age, but her voice still carried the authority of decades. She had performed the ceremony countless times, but something felt different about this morning. The spirit seemed restless, confused in a way she had never experienced before. She cast the bowls and shells, studying their patterns with intense concentration. The entire village held its breath, waiting for her to announce which man would be blessed with Hora as his Yadi. But as Isuja stirred the divination tools, her withered face creased with confusion and growing alarm. "The spirits speak!" she announced. A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd, like wind through palm leaves. Such a thing had never been heard of in all of Abana. Hora felt her heart pounding as she realized that her moment had arrived. The prophecy was revealing itself through Isuja's own divination, and she could no longer hide her true nature. She stepped forward, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the compound with an authority that surprised even her. I am Hora, daughter of Abana, she declared, her words ringing out like a bell. I am both Iadi, master and dome. I am the one spoken of in the prophecy. I reject the lottery. I reject the system that has kept us divided and bound. I challenge Onoja's rule and claim my right to lead this village toward freedom. The compound erupted in chaos. Some women screamed in fear, others fell to their knees in worship, and still others stood frozen in shock. The men across the divide began pushing against the barriers, trying to get closer to see what was happening. The very foundations of their world seemed to be shaking beneath their feet. But the greatest shock was yet to come. The earth itself seemed to tremble as Hora's words echoed through the village. And from the black palace at the heart of the women's compound came a sound like thunder mixed with the screams of tormented souls. The massive doors burst open with a crash that shook the buildings, and Onoja emerged. She was more terrifying than any of the stories had described. "Who dares to challenge me?" Onoja roared. "You think you can break what I've built with my own blood and suffering?" But Hora, instead of cowering before the terrifying figure, felt a strange calm settle over her. She could see beyond Onoja's monstrous appearance to the broken woman beneath. "I think you're tired," Hora replied, her voice steady and compassionate. "I think you've been trapped by your own cause for so long that you've forgotten what it means to be human. You didn't choose to become a monster. You were deceived by the promise of power." "It doesn't matter now," Onoja yelled, her claws extending further. "The spirits that possess me will never let me go, and they won't let you take what's mine. This village belongs to me, and everyone in it serves my will." "Then let me help you," Hora said, doing something that shocked everyone present. She extended her hand toward the cursed queen. "Let me share the burden. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." What happened next defied all explanation and will be remembered in Abana for generations to come. Onoja collapsed to her knees as the spiritual energy that had sustained her for decades began to shift and change. Her white hair slowly returned to its natural color. Her pale skin regained its warmth. The curse was not destroyed, but it was transformed, its power redirected towards healing rather than harm. "What have you done?" Onoja whispered, looking at her hands with wonder and fear. For the first time in 40 years, she felt truly human again. "I've set you free, and I've set us all free. The curse is broken, but the choice of how to live now belongs to each person in this village." As the curse lifted, something extraordinary began to happen throughout Abana. The invisible barriers that had kept men and women apart for so long began to dissolve. The men who had been pressing against the ceremony ground suddenly found themselves able to cross into the women's compound. The spiritual bonds that had enforced separation were weakening with each passing moment. But freedom, the villagers quickly learned, was more complicated than anyone had imagined. A loud crash echoed from the village gates as a group of men burst through, their eyes wide with decades of suppressed desire and frustration. "Give us a woman!" they shouted, pushing toward the compound with desperate hunger. Hora realized immediately that breaking the curse was only the beginning of her challenges. The people of Abana had lived with artificial divisions for so long that they had forgotten how to interact naturally. Gogo drew her sword, preparing to defend the women from the approaching mob. Onoja, freed from her curse but aged by decades of spiritual torment, chose to spend her remaining years working with the Duri to help raise and teach the children of Abana. She had lost her own chance at love and family, but she found the measure of peace in nurturing the next generation and helping them understand both the wisdom of tradition and the importance of choice.